l'école est un facteur de mobilité, mais
School is a factor in mobility, but it's not the only one. For instance, there's marriage. When women marry men of higher standing, they move up socially. So we may say that beauty is a factor in mobility. And sometimes personal enterprise leads to mobility. You build a small business that grows. So there are several factors in mobility, but still I think the essential one is a real transformation of society's structures. Immigrant societies like those of North America are very familiar with the process. The newest arrivals take the lowest jobs and make their way up, hot on the heels of those above. They are generally unpopular with the more established because they are a threat. They may supplant them.
Today, people choose their professional vocations as much on a basis of interest and personal motivation as on society's rules.
Individualism is part of the processes of differentiation, which leads to the dissolution of class. First, it undermines the identities, collective identities, which persisted for many generations from the 18th and 19th century, including class identification. It makes people to adopt new identities, which they very often craft themselves. Secondly, the process of individuation or individualization makes people to abandon the collective solidarities which developed in the past and persist.
Individualism is closely linked with the upsurge of the middle class. The groups of individuals who make up the middle class have different tastes, values, and interests. But they are not in direct conflict.
On top are the very, very rich who basically live like stars. At the bottom are the very poor who have nothing left and who sleep on the street. And in the middle, you have something like 70 or 80%, the middle class. The rich, the nearly rich, the not quite rich, the hope to be rich, who are separated by matters of levels. Social identity won't be based on that. It will be much more about ethnic origin, gender, the neighborhood where they live, how they act as consumers, religious allegiance, and their traditional class allegiances are growing weaker every day.
In an increasingly individualistic society, most social struggles are toward a specific goal. Cultural minorities, feminists, homosexuals, and ecologists are all waging their own wars, unhindered by traditional class relationships. Despite their divergent interests, middle-class people share common concerns. They view the future with trepidation. They fear that they will be unable to maintain their living standard.
The middle class has a hard time feeling secure in contemporary societies. Even people who are pretty well off, who have 2 cars and a house in the suburbs, feel a kind of insecurity. They don't know if their jobs might be taken away from them. They don't know what will happen to them economically. They have big mortgage payments and so forth. So that the middle class is still there, but its confidence has been greatly eroded. And the belief that every family will be able to have its children go on to more prosperity than the parents enjoyed is now in serious trouble.
In Western societies, unqualified workers lose their jobs to people who have mastered new technologies.
Go for stating fracture.
Knowledge of computers, knowledge of technology, capacity to handle information technology does become a stratifying principle, the principle of merit, the new status conventional form of society, which gradually replaces class society, raises this technological skill to a position of the predominant stratifying principle. Like in the industrial societies, class societies, access to property and marketable skill was the main stratifying principle.
The danger of this system is that it excludes anyone who hasn't access to higher education. When unemployment was low, these people could still earn a living. Today, they are in a precarious position. They are disillusioned. They have nothing left to lose. Social violence could increase.
I think it's a real prospect. However, at the same time, probably the affluence in society will allow the upper strata of post-class societies to organize effective policing of the poor, of the underprivileged. It's already starting. Private militias, private security firms are employed in order to protect those who are the haves. On the other end of the social spectrum, we have a frightening and growing nexus between underprivilege, crime, and narcotics, drugs. And that is another frightening prospect of society in which social marginalization, crime, and drug use increasingly combine into this syndrome, which is very difficult to manage socially.
More and more, voices are proclaiming the impending collapse of the middle class. Weakened unions, wholesale dismissals, and the erosion of salaries may lead society to become polarized. The poor will become poorer. And the rich, richer. Between the two, the middle class is being strangled.
This middle class plays a useful part in a great number of services. I simply don't think we can destroy it without destroying the market. We must remember that the middle class has a vital role. It consumes. One of the happy paradoxes of this economy is that it must support a middle class with a fairly high living standard if it's to have a market. So I don't believe in the catastrophe scenario where the middle classes disappear.
The middle class may not be disappearing, but it is increasingly discontented. Many people who have seen their purchasing power shrink are rebelling against high income taxes. Some are no longer willing to pay for social programs. The problem for the middle class is that it is too diversified to form a united social front. Today, not even income level is enough to ensure a place in the social structure.
Basically, we all know that in our patterns of consumption, our way of speaking, our musical tastes, our preferences in dress, that our positions in the social hierarchy are not simply the result of our money. In fact, particularly in Europe, we still have contempt for the nouveau riche, the people who have money and don't know how to spend it well. Because basically, it isn't having a lot of money that's prestigious, it's spending it with class.
The great revolutions have not managed to wipe out social class. Classes change as eras change, but they do not disappear.
One example of how people are still moved by class today, though, is the movie Titanic, and the extent to which audiences identify with the class system of the early 20th century that is presented in the movie. The movie happens to come out at a time when there is increasing inequality, when there's a lot of class resentment. Audiences throughout North America have cheered for the working class hero of the movie, have booed and hissed at the elites who try to pay their way onto the lifeboats and so forth. And